Hey boys and girls, this is Miss Kathy. I'm here to do our second lesson in what does it mean to be saved. And we talked a little bit about that last week. What do we need to be saved from? We need to be saved from the things that separate us from God, and we're going to talk a lot about them today. So if you have some questions about, have I done something that separates me from God? This is a great day for you to be listening. Now, I am here in Genesis chapter 2, where we were finishing our lesson last time. And we were talking about how Adam, the first man, and Eve, the very first lady, how they had been created by God and how much He loved them. And what a beautiful day after day they were having in the garden. And it wasn't boring at all, because boring is part of the change that comes later on. That's what happens to us, but never to Adam and Eve. It was so wonderful. Day after day, they got up and wondered, what does God have to show me today? What part of His creation have I not discovered? And I mean, there's a whole world and a universe of the creation that they didn't know anything about. So they were very excited, and night after night, as the sun went down, as they're together with God, and they tell Him, God, I just had no idea how smart you were, how powerful you were, how creative you are. And here's how your creation shows it. Oh, it was very good. And God, because He is humble and doesn't brag on Himself, would listen to them and smile, because they knew almost nothing about Him. They were just starting to get to know Him. It was a pretty wonderful time. Now, there was one part of the garden that was still wonderful, but it was dangerous. And you may know about this. It's not a part that I told you about last time. I have here a piece of a pine tree. We're going to pretend that that is a tree itself. In the garden, the Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 3, there was a tree. And this tree was called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And God said to Adam, Adam, I've given you all these trees. I don't know what kind of trees were in the garden. Maybe coconut trees? That'd be pretty cool. Banana trees, orange trees, mango trees. I don't know, all kinds of wonderful trees. And Adam, yeah, he knew, because they were enjoying discovering new trees every day. But there's one tree, Adam, I don't want you to eat from. This is called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And if you eat from this tree, it will change everything. Well, how do you mean, God? Adam must have asked. Adam, you're going to have to trust me on this. You know how much you like our friendship? Oh, yes, God, I do. It's the best part of every day. You know how much you love your wife, Eve? Oh, yes, God, I love her more than the animals, more than anything. Well, Adam, if you eat from this tree, it will end everything. It will change everything. It will bring death. What's death? Well, Adam didn't know what death is. You do, though, don't you? But Adam had never experienced it. And so maybe God explained to him that death means being separate. What would that mean? Adam, you and I won't be able to be quite as much together, not in the same way. Well, why not, God? You're going to have to trust me on this. If you disobey on this, everything will change. Your friendship with your wife will change. Your friendship with me will change. Your relationship with the animals, that will change. Adam, don't do it. Oh, God, I won't do it. I won't. I don't want anything to change. I mean, I like all the exciting things that happen every day, but I don't want that to stop. I love what we have. Adam, I love what we have too. So it was a good conversation, and Adam agreed. And he went to Eve, and he said, Eve, you know, we can eat of all these fruits, and we haven't even started trying out all the new fruits. But there's one tree, and he must have pointed it out to her. Don't eat from that tree. Just, Eve, stay away from it. God says it will bring death. And then he had explained that death means the end a separation. And she must have said, okay, Adam, whatever that death is, I don't want it. It sounds terrible. It sounds scary. I don't want it. I'll do what I'm supposed to. And so I don't know how long things went on like that, but it was okay. Why would God put a tree like this in the garden? The garden was perfect, wasn't it? Yeah, and the tree was part of that being perfect. Because there's something about people. When we love, it means we are making a choice. True love means you choose one thing over another thing. When your dad and your mom got married because they loved each other, they chose each other instead of all the other moms and dads, right? They said, yeah, we choose each other. We're going to be together. You're my favorite. You're my favorite, right? Isn't that how that is? And it's the same thing with you as children in your family. You choose to love your mom and dad more than any other lady or man, any other grown-ups in your church, any more in your family. You understand, right? You're choosing to love the most when you love. And that's what God wanted. He wanted Adam and Eve to love him the most. And he sure does deserve it, because he does everything for us. And he had done everything for Adam and Eve. So God put that tree in the garden so that they could show true love. I want you to think for just a minute. You know, sometimes we say, I love pizza. But that's not really love, because pizza can't love us back, right? Sometimes we say, oh, I love my stuffed animals, or I love this sport, or I love toys. But that's not real love, because there's no loving back. Soccer doesn't love you. You might like soccer and enjoy it, but that's not a real kind of love. God loved his people. They were the favorite part of his creation. And he planned on doing for them just wonderful things. He wanted them to love him back. And that's what would have made the garden perfect. Unfortunately, you know, just like I know, that's not what happened. For a while it was like that. But one day, Eve was in the garden, the Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 3, and there was a snake there. And the snake starts to talk to Eve. Now you're going to find some things in this lesson, and you're going to say, boy, that's really different. Yeah, it's different when a snake starts to talk. But God can, you know, when he tells us that it happened, it happened. And God could have made animals as talking in the beginning, and maybe all the animals talked. Wouldn't that have been cool? Anyway, let's move on with the story. That's just kind of a fun thought to think about. The snake talked to Eve, and you're going to find that he doesn't talk like a snake. I want to crawl around. I want to go explore places. I want to get in dark places and go in holes. No, he's not talking about that stuff. He actually ends up talking a lot like God's enemy, the devil. We're not going to talk much about God's enemy, the devil, today, but you need to know that he is not as powerful as God, not even close. And he's trickier than we are. But if we belong to Jesus, we don't need to be afraid of him, okay? But we also need to not be tricked by him, because that's what's going to happen in the lesson today. A lot of you know this, don't you? So the snake went to Eve and said, has God told you that you can't eat from any of the trees? Wow. Well, now that's not what God said. And Eve knew it wasn't what God said. She goes, no, God loves us. He said we can eat from all the trees except for just one. He said, don't eat from that one tree. Don't even touch it. She added a little bit, didn't she? Don't even touch it, because in the day that you do it, you will for sure die. And the snake says something. He said, you didn't know this about God. You know how smart God is? Do you know where he gets his smarts? No. He gets it from that tree. And so if you will eat the fruit from this tree, you'll have the same brains that God does. What do you think about that? Very often, we end up thinking that God isn't giving us something that we ought to have. And that's how Eve started to think, would God do that to me? I thought God loved me. I thought God was good. Maybe God just doesn't want me to be as smart as he is. Why? This is going around in her head, and she starts to think, what would it be like if she was as smart as God? She begins to think of herself as Super Eve. See, she's got her little cape on. As smart as God. That would be so cool, wouldn't it? I mean, God was her hero. She thought he was tremendous. But maybe he wasn't so great if he was trying to keep his smartness away from being shared with her. Wow. She looked at the fruit. I have a peach here. This was maybe not the fruit, maybe it was. It didn't look like it would end everything. It didn't look like it would bring sickness or death. Looked like it was fine. Smelled just fine. Feels fine. And boy, it would be so nice to be that smart, wouldn't it? So she did it. She shouldn't have. But she chose to believe the lie of the snake instead of the truth that God tells. Can I just stop and tell you here? Anytime somebody tells you something that is the opposite of what you find in the Bible, it can't be true. God always tells the truth. And every time we follow something that is the opposite of the Bible, we find it always brings bad consequences, doesn't it? So she took the fruit and she took a bite. She felt okay. So she went to Adam and she said, here's what I did. The snake told me this, and you need to have a bite too. Now, Adam's not tricked. Adam knows that Eve has been tricked. He knows this fruit is not going to make him as smart as God. But this is a test for him too. Who does he love more? His wife Eve or his God? And he decides he loves Eve more. Whatever's going to happen to Eve, it's going to happen to him too. So he takes a bite as well. And immediately something does happen. Did they fall over and die? No, but here's what did happen. There are things about this story that are a little uncomfortable, and this is one of them. They looked at each other, and they noticed something they had never seen before. They were bare. Up until this point, it was kind of like being an animal, being a cat or a dog or a grizzly bear or a cheetah or, a wolf or a fish. People didn't wear clothes, and it was no big deal. Cats aren't embarrassed unless you put clothes on your dog. He's not wearing clothes, and if you put them on, it doesn't feel comfortable to him. But this was the first time that Adam and Eve felt uncomfortable about the way they looked. They had a feeling that was brand new to them, and it was not a good feeling. It was called shame. They looked at each other and they were ashamed. That was a totally terrible feeling. It was terrible. That's my cat, not wearing a hat or a coat or little pants. And they thought, oh, we got to cover ourselves up. What are we going to do? So they took some leaves and they tried to make clothes out of leaves. Now, they don't know much about leaves, do they? Because you know what happens. Leaves get all yellow and they end up getting all crinkly, don't they? Yeah, and they don't last. It was a terrible covering. Now, in the meantime, it was the time for God to come and talk to them. And in the past, they had loved it. I am sure that when God came to talk to them, they would come running and they would tell them about all the new stuff that day. But not this day. When God came, they hid. Why? Because of shame. Remember what I told you about separation? Adam and Eve are ashamed in front of each other, so they put leaves on, and they feel separate from each other. Adam and Eve, now they feel separate from God. When he comes, they run from him. Every time we disobey, it pushes us and God separate. That's what disobedience to God does. Don't forget this. That's why it's so important to God that he came to take care of that separation and to completely change it. Now, the Bible says that God came and he said, Adam, where are you? And Adam said, I'm hiding because I'm bare. And God said, how do you know that you're bare? Did you eat from that tree? Now, it would have been so good if Adam had been manly and had said, yes, I did, and it's wrong, and I'm sorry. But that's not what he did, and that's what we're tempted not to do too. See what this is? It's a little arrow. Adam said, it wasn't my fault. It was Eve's fault. That woman that you made for me, she took it and she gave it to me. Kind of like he's saying, she made me eat. So God turned to Eve and he said, Eve, what did you do? And she said, it's not my fault either. It's the snake's fault. He tricked me. So God says to the snake, snake, from now on, no more legs. Which we don't know what snake legs look like. I don't know if we ever will. Adam and Eve knew. He said, from now on, you'll be down on the ground. And then he talks to somebody else besides the snake. He talks to his enemy, the devil, and he says, the day's going to come when one of this lady's great grandsons is going to step on you and destroy you. Oh, that's a good promise. For years after this, the ladies who are of the family of Eve, they always wonder, is my son going to be the one who steps on the head of God's enemy? And the day comes when that baby's born. You know who it was, right? It was our Jesus. He was the one who crushed the head of his enemy. But not yet. God looks at Eve and he says, this is your punishment. When you have children, it's going to hurt. It's going to be pretty sad. And you're going to have problems in your family. You're going to want things from your husband that he cannot do and he won't want to do. And Adam, this is your punishment. You know how you love to work in the garden? It's going to now be really hard work. It's not going to be a hobby. It's going to be hard to get things to grow. Look at that. You see that thing? That's thorns. There's going to be thorns and weeds that grow in your garden. And it's going to be hard to feed your family anymore. It's going to make you sweaty to try to earn enough to keep your family able to be able to be eating. And then God looked at him and he said, I want to show you about your substitute. Now, you know what a substitute is, right? A substitute teacher comes in and takes the place of your teacher, but just for a while, right? A substitute is something that only lasts for a while. God killed an animal, and he took the skin of the animal, and he made clothes for them, the very first clothes. I have here this cool earring that Mrs. Heather Costner made for me, and if you look at the back side, it's made out of this nice, soft, kind of fuzzy, furry leather. I don't know if you can tell. These are the softest earrings. They're really cool. And God made out of the skin of this animal clothes for Adam and clothes for Eve so that they would feel some less shame. God wanted them to know that disobedience, in order to cover our shame for disobedience, something has to die. This was only temporary. The day was going to come when the real covering for us would come, and that would be Jesus. When he would die, there's no more temporary covering for sin. So God covers them, and then he says, you have to leave the garden. This was a beautiful place where we were together, but you can't live here anymore because there's another tree. And this tree, if you eat from it, it will make you live forever like this, like things are now. Separate from each other, sort of. Separate from me, sort of, because things are changing now. They're not going to be they're going to fight with each other. They're going to keep disobeying God. The animals are going to be afraid of them. And everything did change. And he said, I need you. We need for you to have an end to this. So after a certain amount of time, you will die. I can't have you live forever like this, because there's going to be some real unhappiness. So at the end of the garden, he put an angel with a fiery sword to keep people from going back into the garden. And that was the last day that anybody lived in that garden. Seems like kind of a sad story. It is a sad story, but it's not ended. This is just the beginning of the story. This takes place thousands of years ago. But it's the same for everybody today. Because when we are born, right away from the beginning, we have a choice to choose whether or not we love God and want to stay close to Him, or whether we want to be separate from Him and have our own way. And we are born unable to choose God. We are not able to choose Him. I'm so glad God sent His Son Jesus. In this next video, we're going to talk about how Jesus came, how He came to give us new life, to forever cover our sins, so our disobediences, so God will never see them again, and to give us a wonderful forever. So I hope you will listen to the next video. Bye-bye. Have a great day.